Check, check. Good afternoon and welcome to the final edition of the Reggae University for this year's Rototom Sunsplash. And we are extremely privileged to have with us one of the few people from the reggae fraternity that truly deserve the title of living legend. Please give a very warm welcome for our very special guest, Mr. Bunny Wailer. Bunny, welcome to Rototom Sunsplash. And I'd like to begin today's session with a very general question for you. I'm hoping you can tell the people of Rototom Sunsplash a little bit about your early days growing up in Jamaica.
Well, that's a long time story, you know. It all began in 1947.
Can you move a little closer to the mic?
Yes. Well, I was born in Jamaica in 1947, which is like 62 years ago. And in growing up in Jamaica, it has brought to me the consciousness of who I am and what I stand for in this world of this great human family. Apart from being involved with the Wailers, I have been educated to be the person that I am in the representation of a people who have gone through the colonial slavery of the past up until the present time of our struggle for liberty in this same little land of Jamaica. And to be a part of this struggle that Marcus Garvey and all the national heroes, Nanny and Bogle, and all these people who have struggled for the liberty of the Jamaican people, I am proud to be one of these people who stand for those people and what they represented in the liberation of the descendants of the colonial slavery of the Jamaican people and the people of the Western Hemisphere. Growing up in Jamaica, I have learned to survive. I have learned to resist those things that are not appropriate. And I have learned to bring a message of love that I have received from parenting through all of my existence of companionship with all the people that I've grown up with in Jamaica, including Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and the Wailers in general. And to know that the music that came out of Jamaica, that I was born to have understood, coming from the mento and from this calypso through to the ska, to the rock steady, and now to reggae music, which has been the cream of the crop as we are gathered here in celebration of reggae and the Sunsplash of Italy. It makes me feel really proud and privileged and honored to be here in representation of my peers, Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and all the other members of the Wailers. And to see where the music has grown to this colossal magnitude that we might never have known, but we had hoped that it would be this kind of a strength and this growth that the reggae family has been so much being, every day it is multiplying to become an universal support for this great music. It also makes me proud to be a part of that. And on behalf of all the pioneers and all the people that have been making this music available for the international populace of music, it makes me proud on their behalf to say that it is a good thing that reggae music did come alive and did come out of Jamaica and came out of the Rastafarian culture to be now this great multitude that we see multiplying daily as we grow and the generation and generations to come to inherit. So it's a great thing to be seeing this tree planted in Trenchtown, Kingston, Jamaica, to have grown to be such a gigantic tree that is benefiting so many people, so many nations, so many tongues and cultures, musically and otherwise. It makes me really feel good and feel proud to be here in the representation of all of this.
Thank you. Now, Bonnie, I'm hoping you can tell the people a little bit about your path in music. So, for instance, can you tell us a little bit about how did you come to understand that you had vocal talent? And then how did you become involved more concretely in singing?
Well, you know that all of us have vocal talents because on our first entry to this world, we are slapped on our backsides and we make a scream. And if you don't make that scream, that means you're not alive. So from the very first slap on my backside, I made that scream. And I'm still screaming.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about how the Wailers came together, and also one of the most important aspects of the Wailers was harmony. So if you can tell us a little bit about the Wailers' approach to vocal harmony and your own role within the Wailers.
Well, it all started in Trenchtown. Trenchtown is that place that is filled with musical talented people. A lot of singers, a lot of dancers, a lot of actors. But fortunately, I chose the path of being a vocalist based on the tradition of my being acquainted with the church from my very early times of being involved with music. It came from where my dad was like a preacher, and he had his own church, the revival type of thing with the tambourines and foot stomping and shouting and the drums. And I got acquainted to that music from the age of, say, 4 years, that I used to play the drums in the church to make sure that the spirit came in that brought that kind of vibration that is with us today. And the Wailers, being people who were acquainted also to Trenchtown, all the other members, we grew to knew each other in a way that we were neighbors. We lived next door, and we played on the same play fields, and we went to the same beaches, and we went to the same little parties and dances in the communities. And we decided on getting ourselves together with the full awareness of the consciousness of music as we know it should be represented and presented, and we sought the necessary teachings from the people who knew better about the music. People like Joe Higgs, God bless his soul. And Joe Higgs was one of those people who took the Wailers in the very early stage of our career and taught us all the tricks and the trade in the harmony and making sure that we were on the right track for a group that really was in representation of Trenchtown at the time, as there were no 5-member groups coming out of Trenchtown. It was like 3 members, duos, and stuff like that. But this group, the Wailers, was the first attempt to present a 5-membership group to the world. So Joe Higgs really took time out of his own career as Higgs and Wilson's to depart to the Wailers. All the techniques of harmonies that we developed along the way after Joe had put us on the right path. And out of that came Simmer Down, our first recording with Sir Coxson's Downbeat, which was a #1 record and still is a #1 record upon this present time of Bunny Wailer being here in representation of the Wailers. So it's really been a good and long journey and a satisfying one. It's only that I hope that Bob and Peter would have been here physically to see how much what we believed in had grown to be such a wonderful thing in this world today, as one love is the message that we have brought to the world, and with one love we have gathered the people in this kind of a manner where there is no differences racially or otherwise, and that makes reggae music become that kind of a music that shows a sign of unity that will bring all races together in a manner of one love. And to know that from Trenchtown, from down there in the dungles, down there in the ghettos, there was a trumpet that sounded, and that trumpet has been heard by the global human family, which has brought this kind of an attention that we now see that you people, and without you people, there could never be any reggae music. So it's good to know that the family is together out of the music of reggae, and the family is growing, and the family is still going to be showing that we are together as a family of reggae music. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, since you just mentioned recording for Sir Coxsson Downbeat at Studio One, I was hoping you could tell the people of Rototom Sunsplash a bit more about some of these tracks that you recorded in which you played a key role in that era of ska, such as Dancing Shoes, Who Feels It Knows It, Sunday Morning, This Train, and the very first version of the song called Dreamland.
Yeah, well, in 1965, thereabout, Bob had to go to the United States for reasons of the oppression that we, the Wailers, were experiencing coming from Coxsson. And our parents thought differently about that. And so Bob's mother, Miss Booker, decided to take Bob to the United States to see if we could overcome some of this kind of oppression that we were going through with Coxsson. And in that period of Bob's absence, we introduced a brother in the group called Vision, who was a member of the Soulettes, which that group consisted of Rita, Precious, along with this brother Vision or Dream. And with the three of us now, the Wailers, in the absence of Bob, we did these recordings that you mentioned. And that really made a mark in to show that the Wailers would be the Wailers with or without any member missing. And even in my instance of being away from the Wailers continued with Hurting Inside, Play Play, and all these Rock My Boats and all these tracks in my absence. So it goes to show that once a Wailer, always a Wailer. And any Wailer is the representation of the Wailers. And I am here now to sing these songs, and some of them rather, that I'm sure that it will be understood in the minds of the people who hear Bunny Wailer sings the Wailers songs, to understand that without the Wailers, there could be no Bunny Wailer. And the people who have supported the Wailers from Simmer Down up until Burning, Catch a Fire, they know what they've been getting from the Wailers. And they know what they've been passing on to their kinfolks, that when I am on stage singing Simmer Down, Thank You Lord, One Love, and all these old Wailers tracks, I find that the people, the babies, the teenagers, are singing these songs word for word, which says to me that the Wailers is a stamp in the hearts, minds, souls, and bodies of all the reggae family from this generation onward. Therefore, I will continue to give thanks unto the supreme power and might of the Trinity, Emperor Haile High, Selassie High, Jah Rastafari, because without the inspiration coming from the Most High, this could never have been possible for us to be here in this kind of a manner. And this is an example for the world to follow. Reggae music is the symbol of unity of all people, of all races, of all times. And the governments and the authorities of the world should take this as a simple, simple gesture to make reggae music be the international music of the world, big time.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, you mentioned a period of absence when you were absent from the Wailers during the mid-1960s. And I was hoping you could explain for the people of Rototom Sunsplash about your period of confinement. What exactly happened, and what was that experience like for you?
Well, it's an experience that has strengthened me in a manner that maybe having not had that experience, I would still have yet to understand the true meaning of slavery. And in my absence from the Wailers, I was like sent to a university where I obtained all the knowledge that I would not have obtained had I not been in confinement. And out of that came the track called Battering Down Sentence. And Battering Down Sentence is one of those songs that is on the Black Heart Man album that relates to so many people who have gone through that kind of an experience of being put in a confinement for whatever reasons there might be, only that in my instance it was for the healing of the nation, for the herbs they called ganja, which is the discriminative crime of Rastafarians, as is the only crime of Rastafarians, and that's to be involved with the utilization of herbs in a manner where we use herbs as our sacrilegious symbol of worship unto Emperor Haile High, Selassie High, Jah Rastafari. And for that reason, I was sent to prison, but only to realize that Babylon has made an error by sending Bunny Wailer to prison, because with sending Bunny Wailer to prison, you have strengthened Bunny Wailer to be this kind of a individual that makes sure that we keep battering down sentence and fighting against conviction.
Thank you. Now, you just mentioned one of the landmark albums of all time, and I'd like to put some questions to you about that in just a moment. But before we get to that, can you tell us a little bit about some of the other recordings that you made for producers like Johnny Nash's Company and Lee Scratch Perry? And then tell us a little bit about when the Wailers were signed internationally to Island Records, and then when you ended up drifting out of the Wailers. What can you tell us about those eras before you became a solo artist?
Well, the thing about it is that the Wailers were a unit, and that unit brought to the world some great music coming out of those eras of the 70s through to the 80s, where we had combined our resourcefulness with the likes of Lee Perry for reasons that we were intended on penetrating the UK market, because Jamaica was getting really small for the Wailers. And Lee Perry, having been already acquainted through the Upsetter group that he marketed in the UK prior to the Wailers, we decided on combining our resources to see if we could have Lee Perry do the same for the Wailers. Only that it didn't turn out to be as we planned, although the Wailers have still been brought to the international marketplace in a manner from the Lee Perry source that has not justified the Wailers in any form of economics or returns. But what it has done, it has enlightened the people to so many of the Wailers' works that I am satisfied to know that the people have been receiving those tracks coming from the Upsetter era through to the Beverly's era. And you know that the Danny Sims situation, that's a trip, because out of that, we the Wailers have not really seen any justifiable means why we should have even been involved with Johnny Nash and Danny Sims, because we have not seen anything happening other than being pirated and being treated and mistreated in the manner that says that that was a regrettable moment. But all these experiences have been the knowledge of the Wailers, and out of this knowledge, it has made the songs that came out of the Wailers full of conviction. And we know that what we have been experiencing from being the Wailers, there is a lot of groups that have been experiencing the same situation. But the Wailers did make some kind of a revolutionary move into getting reggae music into the hearts and minds of the people of the universe. And with so doing, I am satisfied to know that reggae music has been the symbol of a lot of people who have been sharing the same experiences that the Wailers had been experiencing from that period of time until we departed in 1973 after doing the Burning album. And in the sense that there were no directions shown and respect shown where the Wailers were concerned in accordance with what we stood for as Rastafarians, we knew that we had to be living in a kind of a manner and a kind of a way that suggested our cultural upbringing as Rastafarians. But somehow Island Records and Chris Blackwell thought differently. They thought that to bring the Wailers to a commerciality where the Wailers would be exposed to all different sorts of cultures, that would be good for the Wailers. I didn't think that that was good for me as a Wailer, so I decided that I would not have anything to do with that direction. So I just stayed as a solo artist, recording good songs, bringing good messages to the people in my absence from the stage and from the international marketplace of the medias and all that kind of stuff, that I was seen as the most famous hermit. But then again, one has to make a decision in themselves. You are your brother's keeper, but you have to be able to keep yourself as self-preservation comes first. And in that decision of my departing from the Wailers, I had preserved myself in the manner spiritually under the banner of Emperor Haile High, Selassie High, Jah Rastafari High, and in that preservation, it has made Bunny Wailer survive all the obstacles to be here in representation of the Wailers, Brother Bob Marley, and Peter Tosh, and Junior Brathwaite, and Beverly Kelso, and all of the other peoples who have been members of the Wailers throughout our period of exalting this great music, reggae. And it is good, and it feels better and better every day to look around and to see where the people are really accepting this music along with the culture of Rastafari in a very serious and convicting way. And that goes to show that what you believe in, you have to make sure you continue to struggle, because there is always that victory of good over evil. And the Wailers have proved beyond every doubt that good really rules over evil. Big time.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, we have a number of other questions to put to you about the later works of your career, so don't go anywhere. But since you mentioned Island Records, we'd like to invite our other special guests to please come and join the panel. Please give a warm Rototom Sunsplash welcome to Chris Blackwell, the founder of Island Records. Chris, welcome to Rototom Sunsplash.
Thank you.
Perhaps you could give us a few words of your first impressions of being here at this festival. Please.
It's an incredible festival. Really, really incredible. It's so much more than I ever expected. It's just wonderful. I would just love to see festivals like this all over the world.
And Chris, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about that pivotal moment when you signed the Wailers to Island Records, and perhaps the two of you can share in some memories of what it was like to first work together with the Catch a Fire album.
I first met Bunny here and Bob and Peter in my office in England. They came in to see me in, I think it was 1972, 1971, 1972. And we talked for a little bit, and then basically I felt that the best way of forging a relationship with them was to offer them an advance to make the record, their first record, and then they went off back to Jamaica. Everybody said that I'd never really see anything. They weren't likely to put together a record at all. And I just always felt differently about it. I felt somehow confident that that would not be the case and that they would do something. Anyhow, a few months later, I went to Jamaica. I went to look for them. They had a record store in just off King Street. Rita Marley was there in the store, and I asked them had they recorded anything yet. She said yes. She said, I think you really like it. It's sounding really good. So I asked her if she could give them a message to say that I'd arrived in Jamaica. Would love to hear it. And the next day, Bob, Bunny, and Peter came and picked me up at the hotel and took me to the studio to listen to the record. And I was just completely blown away because I thought it was a masterpiece, what I heard. So that's exactly how it all happened, to my memory anyhow.
Thank you. And Bunny, can you tell us a little bit about what you remember about how the Wailers put that record together?
Well, you see, the records that the Wailers put together is something that we always make sure we have a lot of music stored in our thing. The songs that we make becomes old as we make them. And we are always listening for the sound of silence to put some noise to it. So the Wailers always have a lot of stuff put down in our archives, unrecorded stuff. And at that time we were in England. We were trying to accomplish a deal that was already on the table with CBS. And CBS had started to record the Wailers without our knowledge of that there was a contract signed by Danny Sims and CBS on behalf of the Wailers. We thought that we were working in conjunction with Jad Cayman, which that was Danny Sims and Johnny Nash's company. When in the middle of that recording, we realized that it was not so, and that there was an agreement being signed in our absence, without our knowledge, that suggested that the Wailers should have been compensated for the work that we were doing for CBS at the time. And there was this brother called Brent Clark, who was our road manager, and he must have got some link with Chris in accordance with inviting the Wailers for a meeting. And because there was some kind of uncertainty as to whether we would be going in the direction that we came to England for, we decided on having this meeting with Chris. So we were invited to his studio, where we went on the roof of the studio. That's where, he must have been saying that's his office, but it was on the roof of the studio that we met. And we talked about so many things prior us having to do with the album, like Coxsone having been giving Chris the Wailers records to sell in the early times, Put It On, and I'm Still Waiting, and Hurts to Be Alone, and all those records that were sold in England, that they were sold by Blackwell. We normally hear Coxsone talking about this Blackwell. We thought he was a black man. So in the very first instance of meeting with Blackwell, I had to find out for myself if this was the Blackwell that Coxsone was telling us about all this time. And Chris said to me, yes, he was the Blackwell. So I said, then what about all those records that you've been selling all this time before, of the Wailers? What has happened to all of that money? He said to me, well, I gave to Coxsone hundreds of thousands of pounds for the Wailers. So I said, that's strange, because we never even got 100 pounds from this guy, Coxsone. So I said to Chris, did you make sure that Coxsone gave to the Wailers what you gave him for the Wailers? Well, that kind of got the meeting kind of uncomfortable, so I decided to change the subject and let's discuss what we were there to discuss. So in that discussion, came up with the idea of doing an album for Island Records. And we were given £4,000, if I can remember. And £4,000 these days, or maybe those days, couldn't do a single. But somehow, the Wailers took £4,000 and went into the studios and delivered the Catch a Fire album. And that album is something that is of a landmark for reggae, as it has broken the spell and has brought the international recognition and acceptance of reggae music. And for that reason, we had to do Burning. And the Burning album, in the same instance of touring the Catch a Fire album, on off days and rest days, we were in the studio doing the Burning album. So at the end of the tour of the Catch a Fire album, we had another album all ready to go, the Burning album. So the Wailers, in that instance, did fulfill our vision of getting the music into the internationality of things, and give thanks to Chris Blackwell and Island Records, because they had a great job to do in making sure that the Wailers broke internationally, big time.
Now, Chris, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about when you released the Catch a Fire album overseas, internationally, you added some overdubs. And if maybe you can tell us a little bit about that process. Why did you do it? How did you do it? And what do you feel about the end result in retrospect?
The reason why to do it was I really felt that the Wailers, the best way to break the Wailers was as a rock group, as a black rock group. Because reggae at that time in England didn't have the respect that I felt that it should have. People didn't recognize the musicianship that existed within it, because most of the hits in England would be like single hits in the summer, would be more like novelty records. So there weren't really albums in a sense, which were on the general market. So I felt that they needed to be marketed as a rock group. And in order to try and get that across, I felt that one needed to bring some elements into the music which would attract that audience. Now, fortunately, there was somebody who I think Bob and maybe all of you had worked with, which was a guy called Rabbit Bundrick. And he was one of the musicians we used. And also there was a guitarist that I had met who came from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, a guy called Wayne Perkins. And so basically the idea was really to make the record more accessible to a rock audience. And that was the reason for adding those elements.
Thank you. So, moving along, after the Burning album, and Bonnie, you were explaining before about how you moved on from the Wailers and launched your solo career. And the first album that you came with can be regarded as an absolute masterpiece, one of the greatest reggae vocal albums of all time, if not one of the greatest vocal albums in any genre. So I wonder, what can you tell us? I put the question to both guests, because of course the album Black Heart Man was released by Island Records. So Bunny, I'd like you to explain to the people of Rototom Sunsplash a little bit about the concept behind the album and songs like the title track, Black Heart Man, Fig Tree, Rasta Man, and as you mentioned before, Fighting Against Conviction. And then Chris, you can follow up by telling us a bit about releasing the album and your impressions of the album at the time.
Well, the Black Heart Man is a very, very serious fable. When we were kids, we all grew up hearing about this Black Heart Man. And we were told that you had to be careful of strangers who might walk up to you and invite you into a situation, or you might be found in a lonely countryside or in the gullies or anywhere that this individual might have shown up, and then he would take your heart out and all that kind of stuff. And with that, it brought a fear on all the youths of that time when they heard the name Black Heart Man. And I was told a story by an individual that he got acquainted with the Black Heart Man when he was fishing in the backwoods of Elsha, and his boat ran into some undergrowth and got stuck. So him and his partner had to take the land for it because the sea was impossible because the boat could not sail. So on taking the land, they got lost in the backwoods of Elsha. And in that instance, they decided to split and go in different directions to see if one of them could have made it out and bring the other also out. And it so happens that one was lost in such a way that he didn't know whether he's going to make it or not. So in the instance of frustration, mosquito bites and all the kind of thing, getting hungry and seeming as if this is the end of the day, here comes the Black Heart Man. And the Black Heart Man came out of the bushes, and the individual said that he fainted. And when he fainted, he awakened to find himself in a hut. And in the hut, there was other Black Heart men, as it would seem, who were living in this hut. And there was a pot being cooked on the fire, and he fainted again because he thought that he was going to be the one that was going to be cooked in the spot. It so happens that he woke up to find that the Black Heart Man had a bowl of fish tea that was cooking in the pot. And this fish tea was handed to him for him to drink and bring back his strength. And he didn't even have strength to take the fish tea because he was all nerve broken down, everything was gone. And the Black Heart Man fed him back to strength by feeding him through a spoon. And after he had been brought back to strength, he was taken to the main road where he was found by the people looking for him. And it so happens that that individual is Mr. Chris Blackwell. And he having told me this story in the absence of Bob and Peter, I said to myself, he must be giving me reason to think or to say that he is devoted in making sure that the Wailers were treated in a manner that he was treated by the Black Heart Man, now that he discovered that the Black Heart Man was really the Rasta Man. So the album Black Heart Man, after being told this story, I did the album based on my experience just the same. And sentimentally, I could say that Chris was very attached to the album because of his experience that he had with the Black Heart Man. And based on that, we went into some serious discussions and the possibility of making this album deal, which we met in about 3 different instances, until we decided that we would go ahead and make this deal of the Black Heart Man with Island Records, Solomonic Production on behalf of Bunny Wailer. And from 1976, that contract was signed. And I don't know if it's because of the sentiments that attaches Chris Blackwell to the Black Heart Man that has attached him so much to the album that he has not accounted for all this time of signing that agreement of the Black Heart Man. So I would like for Chris at this point in time to say to me and to the public who have been supporting in purchasing the Black Heart Man, and without knowing that in their support of the Black Heart Man, they weren't supporting Bunny Wailer, because Bunny Wailer didn't get any returns from the Black Heart Man. So I would like for Chris to explain to all the people who have been in support of the Black Heart Man and what it has done for these people who have bought and have the Black Heart Man in their homes, playing and been growing and making themselves to be greater people, as it has done for me the same way, I would like for Chris to explain to the people why was his sentiment so attached that he would not give Bunny Wailer his fair share of this contract.
Well, of course, we don't agree on this point completely. Admittedly, that I've sold the company in 1989, which is like 20 years ago. I believe before 1989, Bunny was paid some royalties on Black Heart Man and another record that he did with us called Protest. Since 1989, as I said, another company has taken over Island Records, a very large company. There have been many disputes with this company for lots of artists. I myself have been in dispute with them myself, but I don't think it's something that I want to bring up too publicly now. But
well, you see, the thing about it, it's becoming a public affair, because I can't be going through this for all 33 years, and the public is still ignorant of knowing what really transpired with that album. And for now is the reason that we are here in Italy, of all the places to be, that we have now found ourselves in this kind of a situation. So I'm not going to be leaving here without getting some justifiable sounds.
Yes, in terms of this forum here and this public discussion, we're really hoping to be looking at the music and the themes behind the music. So, perhaps, yes, but...
Now, listen, this is serious. This is serious, 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 this is serious. This is serious. My children depend on what I survive through my profession. And if I can't house and feed and care for my children, what is all that about? It doesn't make sense that people go through all the measures of creating something that has grown into a gigantic tree that is benefiting so many people, and the planter of the tree doesn't get no fruit. That's crazy. So, this is, I want it to be understood that this is not something that I planned for. Because if Chris had lived up to his part of the arrangement and the agreement signed by us in 1976, this argument would never have been, or could never have been. So the argument goes right back to 1976, when a contract was signed and there was no compensation as to, in regards to Chris Blackwell's obligation under that contract, for him to live up to his obligation of paying royalties, as those royalties would be the way of Bunny Wailer's existence. And had I not done another album but Black Heart Man, what would have become of Bunny Wailer economically? So this situation has got to be resolved one way or another. It's either Chris has got to look into himself and see where he has done unjustly, where the Black Heart Man is concerned and where Bunny Wailer is concerned, and he's talking about these other companies and corporations that he has that's taken over Island Records. He should be the one to make sure that these people who he's selling his companies to understand that they are obligated on the contract to Bunny Wailer from these contracts that have been signed in regards to the representation of Island Records. And if Chris Blackwell doesn't do that, then a finger can't be pointed on Universal or any of these companies, because they too might be ignorant of knowing that they are to account to Bunny Wailer for the Blackheart Man. And if Chris did not inform them in a manner with the respect that he should be giving Bunny Wailer, then that disrespect will continue in the manner that it has done for 33 years. And this has got to stop. This has got to end. Right now, I am getting ready on behalf of making sure that I get some justice. I'm getting ready to file a litigation, because that's the only way to go. And in the filing of this litigation for a breach of contract, it also adds punitive damages to Bunny Wailer, having not been given the justice from his professional work, from the Blackheart Man, the Protest, and the Bunny Wailer Sings the Wailer albums from Island Records. I have yet to get this justice so that my children and my children's children can inherit those things that relates to these albums. So I would like to hear from Chris, as we spoke about 2 years ago on the phone, and we discussed this same matter. And I said to him, Chris, we have unfinished business, and you have to come to terms with that. Your business and the way how you go about it is not right. He said to me, write me an angry letter. So I said to myself, what should an angry letter be doing for giving me some justice? He said to me, go ahead and write me an angry letter. So I wrote a letter which said that I was going to sue for £100 million, if that was angry enough. I hoped it must have been. And by writing that letter, I have still not yet received any response from Chris in regards to that letter. And all I got was a promise that he was going to talk to the people who should be talked to in accordance with giving Bunny Wailer.
Thank you, Bunny. Thank you. So now let's talk about the reggae to the world. More important.
All right. Can we please, excuse me. All right.
Hello.
Is she a friend of Chris Blackwell?
With all. Okay, gentlemen. With all.
Bob Marley sang a song a long time ago, which says, guiltiness rest on their conscience. So, if Chris Blackwell has a conscience, I am not worried about who cares. I am worried about Chris Blackwell caring, because it's Chris Blackwell's conscience. And I sung a song also that says, what your hands do, it's your own eyes that have seen. So judge your actions to make sure the results are clean. For it's your own conscience that is going to remind you, and it's your own heart that is going to judge you. So be not selfish in your doing, pass it on. So
okay.
I would like for Chris to take into real meditation the song Pass It On, and do just that. Pass it on.
Okay.
Big time.
With the, all right.
Well, sometimes they say when something rests on your mind and it is burdensome, the best thing to do is to get it off.
Well,
And this is what I've just done.
Okay.
And I feel good about that.
Okay. Thank you. Chris, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to answer, yes, absolutely. A couple of years ago, I did ask Bunny. I said, write an angry letter. so I could send it on to the people at Universal Records. The problem, honestly, was that the letter was too angry, and the asking for $100 million, the people didn't take it that seriously. I think Bunny definitely has a justifiable claim, and I've been working a lot to try and get not just for Bunny, but for Toots, and indeed for Bob Marley estate money, which I believe is due to them. But it's very difficult working with them. I think really the best solution is if pretty much all the artists banded together in a class action suit. And I think that's probably the best way to get their attention, because in fact, these lawsuits they get from everybody. They just got it from Eminem, they get them from everybody. And it's very hard to move them. So, anyhow.
Is it easier? Is it the easiest route to go? Lawsuit. Is that the easiest way to go? Sue? Well, if that's the easiest way to go for a lawsuit, then I have no alternate route other than the lawsuit. Therefore, on behalf of my dignity, my integrity, and the justice that is due Bunny Wailer, in accordance with these product that was given and signed to Island Records, and the contracts speak for themselves, then I'm relying on the media, and I'm relying on the fans, and I'm relying on all those people who are here, who are the ears and eyes of the general people of the world, to pass it on, that in the future, Island Records and Universal will not be distributing the Black Heartman album, as Solomonic Production is presently reclaiming the album, and the album is going to be distributed strictly through Solomonic Productions and through the media of the international website. So iTunes will be the people distributing the Black Heartman album and the Protest album and the Bunny Wailer's album for the future. So any mark that you people see not having Solomonic, Tough Gong on as far as the Black Heartman, the Protest, and the Sing the Wailer's album are concerned, that's sure bootleg and piracy. And I think that you people should not purchase that album, because you would be just giving more injustice to.
Okay. Yes. Now, before we continue with this session, can I just please mention, obviously you've both raised some very important issues here, but this forum is probably not the best place to be trying to undertake a legal battle. And also, can I please just request that the members of the public that are attending this session, please show respect to our special guests, please. Now, moving along. Bunny Wailer, I'd like to ask you about some of the other styles that you've recorded, not only reggae. Some of the songs I'm thinking about where you've experimented with rap music, for example. Can you tell us a little bit about those styles?
Yeah, well, you see, music in general has been my life. And I've been listening to all different kinds of music, from the time of listening to people like Louis Jordan, because in my very early time of going to the dance halls, I normally listen to music that makes me dance. The music that makes me dance is those music that relates to the rock and roll period. Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, and all those other people that really made you dance. And I really believe that a music should have something rhythmical to make people dance, although we know that sometimes a love song carries a very strange story, or sometimes a sad story, and all of that kind of stuff. But dancing music is what I've been accustomed to. And the Wailers have in their first instance of making Simmer Down, as it was a dance song, and that dance song is something that has turned up the musical cultures of the world that all other affiliated musical cultures know about Simmer Down. So I've been listening, and I'm also ready to show that I can also do some of those other music cultures. Without doing it, it might not have been a successful ventures in the sense, but then again, people know what Bunny Wailer is capable of musically, big time.
Thank you. I have one related question before we put some questions to Chris Blackwell about Island Records. But Bunny, you were also one of the earliest roots artists to begin recording tracks specifically aimed at the dancehall. And I'm thinking about tracks like Ballroom Floor, Rock and Groove, Cool Runnings, and then later with Rule Dance Hall and albums like Gumption. What can you tell us about what was it like for an artist like Bunny Wailer to begin to make that shift from roots music towards the dance hall?
It's not a shift. It's the other moods of the people. The people in general are the ones that really support what we bring to them. And we are like postmen who bring letters, who bring messages. We don't know what's in the message, what's in the letter, until we are told by who received the message. So by the people having different moods and attitudes, and dancing is one of those moods that gladdens the heart of people. And the music has suggested that we dance in rock and groove because it's all about dancing. And even when I brought that album to Chris, he turned it down, saying that it was too much of a hardcore and it was not as polished and as dressed up as the other albums. And rock and groove in itself has made a serious landmark in the dance hall, that the nowadays dance people and the sound systems, when they want specials to clash with other sound systems, they come for the rock and groove album and the Cool Runnings and dance rock and Rootsman Skanking. And these tracks have been the real foregoing of our struggle in Jamaica, because when there was the politics that suggested that all dance halls were shut down in the 80s, it was rock and groove album that brought back the dance hall. And from that album came, and the dance hall started, it has not relinquished in any manner. So rock and groove is that album that is responsible so much for the dance hall of then and the dance hall of now and the dance hall of the future, big time.
Thanks a lot, Jabi. Mr. Blackwell, I would like to know, how you start in the music business. From what I heard, you were very young. You went around the country, filling the jukeboxes with records. Maybe you tell us of your early beginnings, how you get involved into the music.
I used to go to shows in Jamaica. There were shows put on by a guy called Horace Forbes, who was somebody who sang a little bit like Bing Crosby, and nobody would ever book him or really wanted to listen to him sing, so he himself became a promoter so that he could sing for about 20 minutes or so on the shows that everybody else came to see. And on one of the shows there was an artist called Wilfred Edwards, and he sang a lot like Brooke Benton, and I loved Brooke Benton at the time. And so I decided, I just felt that I'd like to, record him. I love music, and I think like any of us here who love music, you want to get as close to it as you can, I guess. And so that was my way of getting as close to it as I could. It was possible. So I recorded Wilfred Edwards. I recorded 3 artists about the same time: Wilfred Edwards, Owen Gray, and Laurel Aitken. And the first record that came out was Laurel Aitken. And you know, I just pressed the record in the pressing plant, took it around to sell it, and I just loved the whole process. And I kept pretty much doing that all the time. I also managed for somebody 63 jukeboxes. So I used to travel around Jamaica, putting records in the jukeboxes, arguing with the people who owned the little bars or clubs as to, you know, what records should go on, and the division of the threepenny pieces from the jukeboxes. And so basically it was something which was pretty much entirely on the street, going in the studio, and then the rest of the time either going to stores or getting the records played on jukeboxes. That's how I started.
And Mr. Blackwell, when you went to England, you also start, you know, to spread the music there. And maybe you can tell the people, you know, how it went on and how you got this #1 hit with My Boy Lollipop and the whole story of it.
Well, you know, I started in Jamaica recording Jamaican artists in 1960. And then in 1962, Jamaica became independent. And I thought that in view of my complexion, I'd be more associated with the past than the future in Jamaica. Plus also, there were other people making records at that time in Jamaica: Coxsone, Beverly's, Duke Reed, and all these guys. Their records were actually really, really good. They were much better than the records that I was making at that time. So I decided that it made sense for me really to go to England, start up in England, represent the other people, my competitors in Jamaica. So I went to see them all. And all of them, other than Prince Buster, gave me their records to release in England. And so that's basically how I started in England, the same way as in Jamaica, going to the pressing plant, getting the records pressed, taking them around the stores, distributing them. And then one of the records, in fact, the 5th record I released was a record produced by Coxsone, by Roy and Millie. It was called We'll Meet. And Millie had this extraordinary kind of high-pitched voice, which everybody really responded to. So I thought I'd bring her over to England. And I had this a tape full of different songs that I used to tape from recordings that I bought in America and sold to sound system guys. And one of the songs was called My Boy Lollipop. And it just seemed that she'd do a great version of that. So I produced a record of that song with Millie. It was arranged by Ernest Ranglin. And it became a huge hit worldwide. And that's basically how she gave me really my first hit. And that's how I got back into the mainstream of the record business. That was my break, I guess.
And what was the beginning of Island Records, Mr. Blackwell? Was that because this record, I think, wasn't put out on Island already, right? The Millie Smalls?
I didn't put out Millie Small on Island Records because Island Records was only selling records to the Jamaican community in England. And I felt that this could be a worldwide hit, and our company was too small at that time to have made it a hit.
And Mr. Blackwell, maybe you tell us something about it, you know, what it was like when you met Bob Marley, because to a lot of people, I talked about it with Jabi also, he had this very special aura, you know, he was a very, very special person. So what did you see in him when you both met?
Well, frankly, I saw it in the 3 of them when I first met. When the 3 of them walked in, Bunny, Peter, and Bob, the three of them walked in like kings, really, in spite of the fact that they were, I think, stranded in England at the time. The three of them had a tremendous charisma and power to themselves. That was amazing, you know, I mean, for people who are stranded and not in the best of condition, to have that kind of charisma is very unusual. And so I was immediately taken by them. And at the time, I was not really doing much in Jamaican music at that particular time in Island Records, because I was much more involved with rock music at that time. But my heart was always in Jamaica and always in Jamaican music. So this just seemed like a great opportunity, really, to have this kind of black rock band, is how I saw it.
Yes, I'd like to put a related question to Bonnie Wailer, because a great many people around the world, including no doubt many people in this room right now, have embraced Bob Marley as a kind of spiritual brother. Yet you are the only person that I know of that actually grew up with Bob Marley as a brother, because your father and his mother were having a relationship, I understand. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience of growing up with Bob Marley as your actual brother?
Well, Bob is a brother, and he could be like more than a brother, in the sense that I look up to Bob for a lot of good reasons. When I went to St. Anne to live, I was a little city youth. I lived in the city. I was accustomed to those things that are of the city. When I went to the country, it was a total different environment, where horses, donkeys, cows, pigs, goats, and all these other kinds of duties that relates to a child living in 9 miles at that time, when, you know, there were no electricities, there was no kind of civilization that suggested any kind of a machinery or anything. Everybody had to be doing things based on their own abilities. And Bob, as an 11-year-old, had so many responsibilities as an 11-year-old that it brought a lot of admiration coming from me to him in regards to these responsibilities that was his, and that he did in such a great way, because he had uncles who were more like adults, but somehow his grandfather trusted him as an 11-year-old to carry out those duties that his uncles should be carrying out. And from that instance, I realized that Bob had a kind of a strength in him that he had no other choice. Because in those times, for a youth to be grown up in a vicinity that he is the son of a white folk and a black folk, it suggests a lot of kind of negatives and a lot of kind of things that comes from people who think that you should not have gone and gotten pregnant from a white man, and you should not have gone and gotten a black woman pregnant. And Bob was that kind of a child that was really never embraced in a manner that all of the children got their embrace and got a fatherly love and a motherly love coming to him in the way that other children did. And that kind of brought me even closer and drew me closer to him, because I realized that he really needed a friend. He really needed someone to be in his corner, someone to be on his side. So I, being the kind of child that was privileged, my dad had a shop, and we had access to all kinds of food and money and all that kind of stuff. I made sure that I at all times had money in my pocket, so that me and Bob could go and enjoy ourselves by buying cut cakes and grater cakes and going all about the place with money in our pockets. So Bob got attached to me because of those reasons, and I got attached to him because of those reasons of him making me know how to survive in the country, how to move the horse, how to ride the donkey, how to run down the goats and catch them. And Bob in himself was that kind of a individual that was always up to be earning his meal. He had to earn his breakfast, his lunch, and his dinner, because that was the kind of a way how he was treated in that instance. And that brought us so very close that at times when there were no entertainment or no enjoyment, I would make the bamboo guitar. And from making the bamboo guitar, I would sit down and I would sing songs that I learned in Kingston. And Bob was so fascinated by the making of the guitar and the way how I instrumented the songs by playing this bamboo guitar. And with that legacy, I left St. Anne, only to realize that Bob took onto that guitar and that whole affair of music so seriously that he was the one who influenced me back into music. Because when he came to Kingston to live, he came with this whole music thing. And I was going to school, and I was getting ready to go to the university when he came to me with this music idea. He went away and he did songs for Beverly's like Judge Not, One Cup of Coffee, and other tracks, showing me that, hey, if I can do it, you can do it too. So he didn't stop, he didn't relent from pumping the idea in me until I decided that I would go ahead and deal with the music situation.
Thank you.
Big time.
Thank you. Now, Chris, with Island Records, Island will always be associated for many of us as the company that brought reggae to the outside world. And I know a great many of us, particularly in America, our first introduction to reggae came through things like the soundtrack to The Harder They Come, for example. Yet it has been said that even where Bob Marley and the Wailers were concerned, it was terribly difficult to introduce reggae to an overseas audience, particularly in America. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about your experiences of trying to bring reggae to a larger international audience with Island Records.
It could only really, well, there's two sides of it. First side is like singles. Singles are like records. To me, I've always been interested in artists and artists' careers, and basically my roots have always been in jazz. That's the music that I always loved as when I was young. And jazz music was a long playing format. So I've always been into the long playing record rather than the singles. So you could have singles in reggae, but they would need to be, or they were pretty much all of them, outside of Jamaica, of course, were, as I said earlier, like novelty songs. They would be Long Shot, Kick the Bucket, or there was somebody in England called Judge Dredd. Every summer he'd have 2-3 hits. But it wasn't really considered serious music. It wasn't considered, it was considered more novelty music. In order for reggae really to break, it needed the artists to be seen. They had to tour because you couldn't get the music on the radio. And if you can't get it on the radio in America, you can't market music in America unless it's on the radio. The only way is to go and tour and tour and tour and tour and build up a following and build up a base. And so that's really, that was really the direction that I took with all the artists that I worked with.
And Mr. Blackwell, Island Records is an independent label, you know, and being there for 50 years and you being involved in it for 30 years. So what philosophy is behind Island, you know, staying that strong as an independent, which is something very seldom or even not heard of?
A major company is pretty much all of them are owned by Wall Street or the city or by big business who basically are ruled by the stock markets, and as such, it's not really suited to music business or any business which is to do with art, because sometimes one year somebody may have something very successful, and the next year they may have something slightly less successful, but that doesn't mean that their career is not necessarily a very long career. I was always interested in long-term careers, and if somebody's record, didn't do particularly good, it didn't mean that one would drop them and look to sign somebody else. I would just stay with the artist on a longer period. That you can do as an independent company, that you can't do. If I were to have had a job as an A&R man in a company, I would have been fired. And if I got another job with another company like it, I would have been fired again. Because I was always thinking more long-term than short-term.
And what does it need to nurture those talents, and to make this artist development? I think it takes more than just, putting a record out. So what was it like, Mr. Blackwell? Maybe you tell us a little bit about it.
Well, my feeling, what the main role is to try and give encouragement and support rather than criticism. So, but I had a different approach, and it worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody. I never, for example, I never asked the Wailers to give me a list of the songs or let me hear the songs before they were going to sing them. I signed them, I trusted them, I figured that they would know what songs they wanted to record. And that was my approach. I never had people do demos for me. I signed the artist and supported the artist's direction. So that's really the difference in my approach. And as I say, it could work for somebody who was owning their own company. It probably couldn't work for somebody who had a job.
Mr. Blackwell, one thing about the reggae albums that came out on Island Records, not only Bob Marley and the Wailers, but also Third World and Jabi's albums. What was very special about it also was the packaging, the cover art, which pretty much until today defined kind of the imagery of reggae music in the public's mind. How did that come about, and how did you develop that?
Well, again, I always believe very much in packaging. And a lot of people would say, what does it matter so much what the packaging, and it's what's on the record that matters. Well, of course, it's what's on the record that matters, but when there are a whole lot of records in a record store, how do you decide to pick on something? How can something jump out? And I felt that if you really show that there's some thought and attention paid to the graphics, that people would recognize, either consciously or subconsciously, that there is something perhaps happening on the record itself. So I would spend a lot of time and a lot of effort to try and get the packaging unique, so people would feel there's something worthwhile inside.
I have a question for Bunny Wailer before he will go. And I want to talk about the present and what I consider a very important issue. So, Bunny, I know you had a different feeling comparing to now about coming to Italy. And this is because the horrors that Mussolini's soldier did there in the 30s. But now you had this very important change of direction. So can you talk our people about that?
Well, the history that I have learned in accordance with Ethiopians and Italians coming from as way back as when the Nazarene was born. And the Bible history shows that Rome was the power and all people had to go to Palestine to pay taxes. And in that instance, the Nazarenes family had also to go to Palestine to pay taxes, with Mary quite pregnant. She had baby in Palestine in a manger. And from that instance, I've tracked the history to see where Rome and the Jews seem to have been having their little squabs over the centuries. And this led to when the invasion of Mussolini on Ethiopia that was done, which was such a wrong thing done that Mussolini paid dearly for doing that wrong. And all of the different tribalry and enmity and those kinds of conflict that have been experienced by the people of Ethiopia and the people of Italy says to me that the extremeness of anything goes from one end to the other. And because of the conflicts of war shared by these two nations, it so happens that the sympathy that has been handed down to their generations, to their kinfolks, to their children, have led them now to be mating in a way that Ethiopians and Italians are making family. So it shows that beyond every conflict, there is something that is greater than conflict, and that's the weapon of love. And by understanding these things, as the Wailers relates to love, and one love is the order, I learned that this conflict that had been experienced by past tense of the Italians and the Ethiopians is not the same with the present situation with Ethiopians and Italians, because Ethiopians and Italians are now mating and making family, and that shows Bunny Wailer that it's time for us to be in that kind of a unified way, because we have inherited from war, we have inherited love and peace. And because of that reason, I decided that I would come to Italy. And not only for the reason of coming to Italy, but charitably, because the money that would be paid to Bunny Wailer to perform on this event, I am going to be giving that money, part of it to Italy. They had an earthquake just the other day, and I'm going to be giving part of that money to Italy. As well as I'm going to be giving the other part to Ethiopia. We have so many different stuff doing in Ethiopia. And I hope by doing this, it keeps the link of both nations in Rastafari to be one nation. Big time. Respect.
Thank you. Now, I understand that Bunny Wailer has some other commitments, so he will shortly be exiting the session. We'd like to ask Chris Blackwell to remain behind for a few further questions, if that's agreeable to you. So I'd like to put a final question to Bunny, which is to ask, what can we expect from Bunny Wailer in the present and the future?
Well, presently I am working on several projects. A lot of people might not know that I have a daughter that is now in the business. While other brothers bring sons, I bring a daughter to the business. Big time. Her name is Sensi Love. C-E-N with a C, L-O-V-E. Because she loves Sensi and she's Sensi Love, you know. And she has an album that is coming soon titled Save the People. I don't know if Chris Blackwell might be interested in distributing this one. But this album coming from my daughter is gonna be something special because I produced it myself, arranged it, and made sure that I gave it the treatment that should be given Bonnie Wailer's daughter in that respect. And for myself, I have like 2 albums. I have an album called Unite, which I think is the order of the day. That is where we all should be aiming at in this point in time of our lives, where as human beings, we should treat each other in that manner, and unity is the best way to go about it. So Unite is the next Bonnie Wailer album, along with Combination that I've done with 11 of our female DJs in Jamaica, you know, the Patras and the Lady G's, Sister Carols, and all these other sisters that I've done this album called Combination. That is a great album, and it's a different one because there's never been something like this one, where an artist combines with so many different people, especially females. So these 2 albums, rather 3 albums, will be coming out in September, August, September, and I'm saying to the fans that go out and get them because they are for you, big time.
Thank you. Okay. Stick around for a few further questions with Chris Blackwell, but please give us once more a warm round of applause for our special guest, Bonnie Wailer.
Respect.
Thank you very much. And Bonnie will be on the main stage tonight, as I'm sure you are all greatly anticipating. Meanwhile, Chris Blackwell, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about the recording studio that you established at Compass Point in the Bahamas and the incredible house band that you set up there with Sly and Robbie, the keyboardist Wally Badaroo, the guitarist Barry Reynolds, the percussionist Sticky Thompson, and Mikey Chung. Please tell us a bit about opening the studio and the house band that you put together as the Compass Point All-Stars.
I put together a studio in Nassau because Nassau is like a blank canvas. It has little or no character to it, but it's a very good place to go and work if you have done all your own creativity wherever you live. As a place to go and record, it was a very good place. This band I put together particularly was for Grace Jones because I felt that Grace needed to be projected as a kind of new wave artist rather than a kind of disco queen, which she had been before. And I felt to get the right kind of sound, you needed a Jamaican rhythm section and a European mid-range guitar synthesizers. And we put together this band, and from the very first track, it just gelled, and I was there really to record one record with her, but we recorded the material so fast that we just stayed and did 2 albums.
Thank you.
Oh, Chris, I have a question too. So you said your aim in terms of reggae was to market the reggae as rock, so have Jamaican people with the charisma of the rock people. So can can you spend some words for our people about two important experiences, working with Toots and Maytals and Black Uhuru?
It was the Wailers, particularly the idea of presenting them as a rock act. But after the Wailers, Black Uhuru came along, and Black Uhuru were naturally like a kind of reggae rock act. And then there was another act I worked with called Inner Circle, who had an incredible lead singer called Jacob Miller. And he himself used to listen to a lot of rock. So those three were really the main ones. Those were the only ones I would say which I saw in a kind of rock vein. In terms of Jimmy Cliff and Toots, they were more in a kind of soul vein initially, and in Burning Spear or Steel Pulse or a lot of the other acts, they were just strong reggae bands. But the rock idea really was particularly for the Wailers.
Mr. Blackwell, what made you leave the music business in the first case when it was after 30 years and you started Palm Pictures, and you of course gave us wonderful movies, also really authentic Jamaican movies, but maybe you tell us something about your decisions and how this movie thing came about.
Well, remember I told you earlier that if I had a job with a big company, I would have been fired. Well, when a big company bought Ireland, I didn't get on with them at all, so I didn't like the environment, and I didn't like how it operated, and so I just left. And then when I started Palm Pictures, it started at a time when I really believed in DVD. DVD was just about to start, and from the time that video first came on the scene, I felt that that music was going to be marketed more and more as in an audiovisual form. So I felt DVD was going to happen. So I really started Palm Pictures with that idea in mind. Not really to be a film company, more audiovisual, music and picture.
And how did the ideas like the movies Dancehall Queen or Third World Cup, I think they were both Palm Picture, weren't they? Yeah, maybe you tell us a little bit about those.
Well, I just felt that, and I still do feel that Jamaica has not produced anything like as much visual material as it should do, considering how much audio material has been released over the last 40 years or 50 years, close to 50 years by Jamaica. It's an incredible amount, but there hasn't been a lot of films, and I think there is interest all over the world. The same people who are interested in reggae, I think, would be interested in films depicting the same kind of characters and stuff. So my plan was to try and do a film every year, but there's so much more to a film than there is to a record. You know, you have to have a script, you have to have, you know, it's much more of a collaborative thing, and you can't really do it unless you have the scripts. And a lot of scripts would come, but they were very violent. And you know, I really love Jamaica, and my area that I'm working in now is in hotels, etc. in Jamaica. And I've always, you know, I've always been concerned about releasing something which could have an overall negative effect on Jamaica. And so I've tried to avoid anything which is too much violence. So I haven't just had the material.
I would like to go back to Bob Marley. So we did talk about Catch a Fire, and this album is a landmark, but another landmark is the Exodus album, and many people is considering the Exodus the creative peak of Bob Marley and the Wailers. And this album was conceived and recorded in London, and probably you were present in the studio and you got the vibes. So can you talk us about the making of the Exodus album from your perspective?
I was actually not in the studio when they were recording. I was not in the studio when Bob was recording any of the records, really. I was involved in mixing all of them except for Survival. And there was only one I could claim to have been in the studio and co-produced, and that was Redemption Song. Because Bob had recorded it with a band, and I told him I thought it would be better just with a guitar. And so he did it with a guitar, and I was there. So that's why. But that was the only thing that I did.
But I know you were very instrumental in the editing of the album, like the order of the songs, and it lyrically wise, it's very important.
No, with a lot of one of the areas that I guess the area I'm strongest in is the sequencing of records. You know, what's the first track, second track, third track, that kind of thing. So I was involved with that with Exodus. So in fact, with all of them. Again, except Survival. That's the only one I wasn't involved in.
Yes, I had another question. In addition to working with Bob Marley, you've worked with a number of other iconic figures, both in the reggae world and outside the reggae world. So I was hoping you could give us a few words of your impressions, a couple from the reggae world and a couple outside. So can you tell us about your impressions of Jimmy Cliff, Lee Scratch Perry, and then Grace Jones and Marianne Faithfull? What can you tell us about working with these characters?
Well,
and John Martin, apparently.
Jimmy Cliff is one of the really great artists out of Jamaica. We tried really hard to break Jimmy Cliff in England. I brought him over to England, and we just couldn't find either the song that would break him or enough of an audience which would break him. In spite of the fact that he was brilliant at identifying bands. The group Procol Harum used to be Jimmy Cliff's band. Another band, Mott the Hoople, they used to be a Jimmy Cliff band. Jimmy went off to Brazil for a song festival, which he won, I think. And then on the way back, he went and made an album called Wonderful World, Beautiful People, which I consider probably the first album, something conceived as an album in Jamaica. It had really great songs on it. And that really nearly happened, but it just didn't happen. And he, in fact, left Ireland a couple of weeks before I met Bob and the Wailers, because he felt, I hadn't really given him the success that he'd hoped he would get. Who were the others?
Yeah, Lee Scratch Perry.
Well, Lee Scratch Perry. Lee Scratch Perry is really like a genius. Lee Scratch Perry, I would say I learned more from sitting around in his studio than from anybody else in the record business. Watching him work was just a complete joy. He was just an absolute master. I can't begin to explain how brilliant he is. The equipment he used to make his records with was the simplest amateur equipment. He was amazing. He's the only person that I saw Bob kind of a little anxious or nervous of when he was in the studio. He was very strong. He was just brilliant, really, and I think really, he probably made the best tracks of Bob. Actually, there's earlier records, African Herbsman, and What's the other one? Rasta Revolution?
Yeah, Rasta Revolution.
Rasta Revolution, those two. So that's Lee Perry. Who else?
John Martin from the crowd.
John Martin. John Martin was the first white artist I ever signed. I don't know, well, I do know why I signed him. I signed him because even though he was a folk singer, I felt he was like a jazz artist. And as I said earlier, jazz was really my favorite kind of genre of music. And we made a couple of records with him. Neither of them did too well because, understandably, Island Records at that particular time was just known for selling Jamaican music, and suddenly this white folk singer turned up on the label. Nobody kind of figured it out. So, and then later on, we re-signed him. I produced one record with him called One World, and he made some masterful albums. The best one, I think, is one called Solid Air. And he was always really like a jazz artist. He was totally uncontrollable. Whatever he wanted to do, that was it. It was hard, in fact, even to get musicians to play with him because he wouldn't stick to the normal sort of 8 bars or 12 bars. If he felt like changing the chord after 9 bars, he'd change it, and he was just his own man. He was totally original. Sadly, he died earlier this year. Nick Drake. Nick Drake is another incredible artist. I first met him when he came to see me in my office in 1966. He was interested to sign with Ireland, but at that point in time, we were still not in any folk business. We were in reggae business and in a kind of rock business, Traffic, Spooky Tooth, Free, bands like that. And having had the experience of not being very successful for John Martin, I told him I loved what he did, but I didn't really know if I could really sell it. And I said, come back in 6 months. He came back in 6 months. Nothing really had changed. And then I made a deal with a guy called Joe Boyd, who was an American in England who made some great records. He also produced John Martin, Incredible String Band, Fairport Convention, Sandy Denny. And when I made a deal with him, lo and behold, he'd made a deal with Nick Drake, and so Nick Drake came back and was back on Ireland then. But he became more and more introverted and didn't want to perform, just pulled back. It was very sad. He died very young. I think he was 26 years old when he died. It's very sad.
Right, thank you. And how about Grace Jones, another
Grace,
unique individual?
Well, Grace is a miracle. Grace is, I don't know what you can say about Grace Jones except she's an icon. She's actress, interpreter. She's totally an amazing character. She's terrifying on stage, and she's like a lamb, and quiet as a lamb, and sweet as can be in a home, or she's totally different. She just turns as soon as she goes on stage. She becomes this terrifying kind of person, but at home she's sweet and as soft and as gentle as she can be. She's a great character, and she's a miracle because she looks the same today as she looked 30 years ago.
It has often been said this afternoon, and there's no doubt that you are responsible for the international success of reggae music. How do you feel about the development of your baby, so to say? How it's been doing after you kind of let it go?
It's so fantastic to see this right here, what's happening here, how this music started in Jamaica, a little tiny island, and this music has gone everywhere in the world. It's really incredible. If you think what Jamaica has produced, not only in terms of how many different artists, how many great recordings, how many inventions where Jamaica has changed the whole course of music. Jamaica was the first place that started screwing around with the electronics and having echoes and double echoes and all the sounds that we know as dub. They were the first to even do dub. They were the first to do instrumental versions on the back of hits. Obvious thing to do, but nobody had ever done it before. There's just been so much invention that has come from Jamaica. There's so much creativity that's come from Jamaica. And sure, I played a part in it, and that I released it in England, and it became wider and wider. And but it's really what Jamaica has produced, and the people themselves in Jamaica, which has made it spread. It could not have happened otherwise, and it's been embraced really in every corner of the world. Reggae music, not just Bob Marley, reggae music is in every corner of the world. And I would just hope that the festivals, if they could get festivals of this kind of quality in different countries over the world, and that's something that I would really love to see. But I really have to congratulate the founders of this festival and everything. I think it's absolutely amazing.
And Mr. Blackwell, seeing things like that with your own eyes now, do you think, does it make you maybe want to go back into the business again?
No.
Well, on that note, we're running out of time and we will begin to have a noise problem. Well, can you please put your question respectfully, please? Yes, so come forward and please put your question respectfully.
Give thanks. Just so sorry for before, but when I see on the paper taking reggae to the world, I thought it was maybe more important to talk about that. So I have a question for Mr. Chris Blackwell about how to take reggae to the world. I wanted to know if you could be interested, or if you could know people who could be interested to set up like a permanent reggae village, like maybe in Jamaica, where it could be a school, a reggae school for musicians, a healing center for worldwide healers to come there and practice them healing, and a place like entertainment. Like this could happen like 20, 65 days a year with reggae healing education. Like, do you think to get a foundation for that, to get a land where everybody could go anytime to share a vibe, could be like in Jamaica with the locals, and like a real reggae village with real education and treatments, and it could be like volunteers coming to share, or like here they spend a week and give some money, that the festival or the village could be self-sustainable with eco-farm and this. And just one more thing, and from that little village, that to start to unite the reggae people and to start to do like a worldwide villages, you know, like getting people together and start to live like that. So if you know anybody, like meeting a round table with maybe 10 artists or anybody interested, and start to do this foundation of reggae villages worldwide. And guest house, maybe. Give thanks.
Anything, including this very festival itself, or anything starts with somebody or 2 or 3 people who have a lot of passion for something. That's how something starts. One has to find somebody who has that passion and energy, because it's not easy starting anything, and especially not starting something as comprehensive as what you're talking about. But one just would have to find somebody, or somebody will emerge who would want to do that, and that's the only way things ever happen. It starts with one, two, three, four people who are just passionate about. It's not a bad idea, but I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying it's something which one has to identify the people who can drive it and get it going, and can have some resources to do it, because everything you need some resources to get started.
So. Maybe you should start it. So, sorry. There's do we have did we have another question? Can you come forward, please, before we wrap things up?
Do you have a favorite record that you've made successful? A favorite record that you've made successful?
Thank you.
Favorite record? One tune? My Boy Lollipop. My Boy Lollipop was my first hit. I wouldn't be sitting here without My Boy Lollipop. So. It's my favorite record. I mean, it like opened the door for me. There've been lots of records that incredible records that I'm proud of that have come out on Ireland. Some I had something to do with, some I had less to do with. Cat Stevens, for example. Obviously Bob Marley, Winwood, lots of different records, lots of records. But if it was to take one track, for me, I have to say the one which gave me my break.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Okay. Yeah, please come forward.
I would like to know if you ever thought to write a book about Bob Marley, about your experience with him.
No, I don't have any plan to do that.
Okay, I think there was another question in the audience somewhere there. Yeah. Any last questions from the audience for Chris Blackwell? Well, in that case, I'll put the. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Oh, is there someone? Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Sorry. I would like to ask you, you are not in the music business anymore, but I would like to know if there's some female singer in reggae music, new artist in generation, that you find interesting, and if you don't produce anymore, but you make a dream about this inspiration. Reggae female.
Are there any reggae females that inspire you right now? That maybe if you were still in the business, you would want to be working with them?
I think I just saw the other night with Beanie Man. Wasn't it Beanie Man? Yes, with Beanie Man. I thought she was great.
You're talking about Shireen Anderson?
Shireen, yes.
That played Michael Franti. Yeah.
With the Michael Franti, that's right.
Michael.
Sorry, yeah. I thought she was great.
Any last questions from the audience? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Greetings. My name is Johan from Slovenia. I wonder if you can tell me something about graphic design. It was mentioned earlier. Actually, I noticed, I don't know actually what logo is Island Records or Mango series, but it's the palm tree. And I noticed two versions. One is the New York skyscrapers, and the space in the middle is the shape of the palm tree. Which version was the first? Was the palm tree or the
label that we, because my label a lot, right, for years. And there was a label that was designed by somebody called Tony Wright, who did most of the album cover for Island and did a lot of the labels for Island. And there was a label that, if that's the one you're talking about, which like skyscrapers, but the space in the middle looked like a palm tree, right? Well, that was one design.
That's the original.
No, that was one which was hardly used. I don't know why, but it was just hardly used. I think maybe there's 3 or 4 records. Maybe that can be a story, but it's really listening to the lyric, listening to the tempo, and listening to the key of the song. You don't want the songs all to be in the same key, and you want the tempos to build right. And if you have something which is strong and exciting, then after that is the time that you can have something more relaxing, because people are still buzzing on the one that's exciting. And that's really the thing. But in the case of Exodus particularly, it was to try and put together an album which on one side was really the sort of revolutionary type side, if you like, and on the second side represented more how Bob was feeling at that time, because he had started to become successful, and so he was starting to enjoy life, and so the second side was more a kind of love tracks, really, basically.
Thank you. Yes, please come forward.
Hello, I'm Martin from Austria, and I want to ask, what did you feel when you first met Bob Marley? When you saw him, did you have any impression, special impression, or any idea of what may happen in the future?
Thank you.
Well, I kind of answered that a little earlier. I don't know if you're here. It was the 3 of them. When I first met Bob Marley, I met Bunny at the same time, and Peter Tosh. And they were all very impressive to me, and equally so. So, and did I think they would make it? Yes, I thought they would make it big time. I just felt it.
Yes, yes.
Hello, I'm Chiquitita. I'm a dancer in Jamaica, actually. Dancehall dancer. I'm here with Sickenhead over there, and we've been doing some workshops as well. So we almost missed this one, but I'm happy to be here. I just wonder how you feel about the development of dancehall music after reggae, and what is your feelings about dancehall?
I'm fine with some dancehall. I'm just not crazy about the ones which have too much negative lyrics. But talking about dancing, what I think is there needs to be more dancing coming out of Jamaica. More dance, 3, 4 people who work as a troupe. I just feel there's a big need for more dance to come out of Jamaica.
Thank you. Yes.
So I have a question about My Boy Lollipop, since you say that it was the most important records. 2 questions indeed. The first one is, what happened of Millie Small? And the second one is, if you know that the rest of that song had Italian versions, German versions, Japanese version, did you know that at the time? And what about, incidentally, about royalties of the stranger version of My Boy Lollipop?
I didn't get, honestly, the question. Did you ask me if I knew it was in lots of different languages?
Yeah, that's one
part.
No, the question were two. The first one was that at the time there were foreign versions of My Boy Lollipop, a Japanese, German, two Italian different versions. I want to know if you know about that and how it works for royalties, if it works in some way. The second question is what happened of Millie Small? Because
What
she
happened to
disappeared.
Millie?
Well, Millie Small is alive and well, and she lives in London, and I saw her on her 61st birthday in October the 6th. And I didn't know anything about all the different language versions, and the royalties would go to the writers of the song. Millie wasn't the writer of the song. The song had been recorded previously.
Thank you. Do we have any last questions from the audience for Chris Blackwell? Any last questions? Well, in that case, Chris, I'd like to put the final question to you, which concerns the Ireland 50th. There have been a lot of events in London, some very impressive live shows with Grace Jones, Sly and Robbie, Toots and the Maytals, Aswad, just to name a few. And you've also been reissuing, or Universal Ireland have been reissuing some of the classic albums from the Ireland catalog, like Solid Air with bonus tracks, some reggae box sets. Police and Thieves will be coming with a number of bonus tracks. I wondered if there were some other events or other things happening connected to the Ireland 50th that you wanted to let the people of Rototom Sunsplash know about.
There may be something in Jamaica in November. We're not sure yet. We're trying to figure it out.
Okay, so once again, please give us a warm round of applause for our special guest, Chris Blackwell, the founder of Island Records. And this is the final Reggae University session for this year's Rototom Sunsplash. There will be other debates here in the tent, but thank you all very much for making these sessions so special.